Good morning. I'm going to try again. It's been a little bit of a challenge doing this, but I'd like to say good morning on this kind of gloomy day in a very gloomy time. But the whole idea is to do things that are fun and challenging and interesting at this time. So let's begin. My name is Jennifer Manocherian, and I'd like to welcome you to So You Think You Can Write a Screenplay. It's a 5-session course that's going to take place on alternate Fridays for over a 10-week period. And I hope you will enjoy it, and I hope you'll stay with it, because I'm going to give you some continuing work to do to track during this session. So by the end of it, you'll have a better sense of really what's involved. It isn't all going to happen today. This is just your beginning. The course is designed to be fun, because who doesn't love to watch movies and to talk about movies and to think, oh my gosh, I can write a movie? Hey, that's not so hard. So the whole idea is for you to start to think about whether you really can write a movie, because it is hard. The fact is, it is hard. And I have to say, it's pretty weird to me just looking at myself. So I would love to encourage you, if you have any comments, any suggestions, any questions, any notes, whatever, to please use the sidebar for chats, because I'd love to not be quite so alone doing this. Let me begin by talking about what's going to happen over at least today and during the period of time that we would be together. I'm planning to give you some basic guidelines or rules about screenwriting each session, and I will be building on what I've told you before. It's not all going to be today. It'll be a little bit each time. And I'm also going to be giving you a prompt with a beginning of a little story for your screenplay that you're going to try to develop and write over this course, just to get a little, dip your foot in the water. It's not going to be the the movie that you may have in mind, but it's going to be one that you're going to develop, and hopefully by the end of the course, you'll have a better understanding of what it takes to get from A to Z. And I'm also going to give you a film to watch each week, because that's how we learn. We learn a lot by watching, particularly the more we know about screenwriting, the more we can learn when we watch things. There are different ways to learn about screenwriting, and I think that you can do it by reading about it. There's a lot of really good books that have been written, and it's academic. It's not like actually hands-on doing it, but it's a very good thing to have as a background. And there's a lot of books. I mean, one of the most famous is Save the Cat. There's a series of those, but there's also, if you go to a website, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's scriptreaderpro.com. They suggest 10 books, and the first one is pretty funny. It's like, my movie sucks. It says something like that. And then 100 ways to make it better. So that's one way to do it. Another way is to also read scripts, which you can get online. You can Google online, and it doesn't really matter if it's a movie you've liked or not liked. It'll show you, one of the things it'll teach you is screenwriting format, which is really important, because you never want to ever submit a screenplay to be written by anybody that isn't properly formatted. And while I'm talking about that, there's also, if you really choose to go forward, there are different software for screenwriting that are really helpful and actually essential, because that's how people read them. And the one that I use and that I recommend is Final Draft. Once you learn how to use it, which is not difficult at all, it will format it for you, and it's if you try to do it on Word and format it yourself, it's just not worth it. If you're really serious, you should get a good screenwriting software. And aside from that, reading and getting software, another great way to learn is watching movies. And in fact, doing it all in conjunction with reading about screenwriting and reading scripts and then watching movies and really starting to be aware and notice what it is, how they develop the characters, how they how they bring in the plot, whether it works, whether the ending is earned, whether you care about the people. There's so many things you can learn. And in fact, it's probably easiest. I mean, you should watch movies for entertainment, television shows, whatever. Watch as much as you can. But I would also recommend that you take one particular movie and it should be probably the genre that you most enjoy and that you would if you do want to write a screenplay that you would be modeling it on and really start to study it. Just watch it over again. Think about what is it you like so much about it? How is it that the how are the characters? What is it about the characters that you like? How does the writer bring them to life? What is it? What do they wear? What do they eat? What are the things that tell you about their character? How well is the plot done? Do you sit there saying, "Oh God, I know where this is going"? You know, when you start anticipating every scene and you know what's coming next, that's not good writing. I mean, I think some things are predictable, comedies in particular. You know characters have certain ticks and they make you laugh when you keep seeing it over and over. But for the most part, if you feel like you can anticipate everything, then I think that's a problem. I think you want to be surprised a little. But by the same token, you want to make sure that the ending is earned. So, I mean, they're different, they're all different things. So, let me just give you a few basic uh, rules about screenwriting that, at least for this particular session, and then we'll go from there. One of the things is that most movies are between 90 and 120 pages. And I would say between 90 and 100 is kind of the ideal range because very few movies warrant being longer than 120 pages. And you figure kind of a page a minute. And when a movie is like, if you see a movie that's 3 hours, well, maybe Scorsese does it, but most people don't want to do that. I usually try to aim for between 90 and 95 pages. And a movie is typically divided into 3 acts. The first act, which is like the first 10 to 15 pages, is the setup. And that's where your characters are introduced. And then you kind of find out what it is, what they want. What are their goals? What is their obstacles? What are their dreams? And from there, you get to the kind of meat and potatoes of the movie, which is like from the about 50 pages, where you're going to find out all the obstacles and the conflicts to getting what they want, because that's how most movies work. You've got to have, it's all about obstacles getting in the way until finally you get to a resolution, which is the last 5 to 15 pages at the most. And that's when at the end of act two, it's when the conflict really reaches a peak and somehow gets resolved. And it's very important that the resolution is one that makes sense. You can't see a movie and then feel afterwards like that was a cheat. Where did that come from? You want it to feel like it makes sense, but you also don't want to feel like, oh, I knew that from the first scene. That can happen, of course, based on the casting. Like if you have two major movie stars who are in a movie and it's a romantic comedy, I mean, you know from the first moment how it's going to end up, but you also get charmed by them along the way. So they get away with a lot that way. Then another point I want to think about is the character arcs of the people, because you got to the people who are your main, you've got your protagonist. There may be two protagonists, but mostly it's a one. I mean, if it's a buddy movie, it's two, but mostly it's one. And who they are at the start and what makes them tick and what they want and what their obstacles are and where are they at the end and how do they change is very important, because the main characters must change. And as they change, you have to be, it happens incrementally, but you have to be seeing it and you've got to really know those characters. They've got to live within you. I mean, it isn't just to sit down and write a character. Often before you even start writing a movie, you start to think about who these people are. Who is this person? How does that person think? What does the person want? What does the person say? A lot of it, a lot of your work is going to happen not just when you're sitting in front of your computer or your pencil and paper, for some of you. uh, you'll be thinking about scenes and what are they saying in that scene and what are they feeling in that scene and how are they acting in that scene. So it's both, you're going to be both sitting in front of your computer and plunking away, and you're going to be just thinking a lot about these people because during the course of writing a movie, these people have to be very much in your head a lot. And then you want to know who else inhabits that universe. There's going to be sub characters, and there's nobody who's going to come in who doesn't have to somehow be very, very relevant to the main story. You can't just plunk in some funny character just for no reason. There's nothing that happens in a movie that happens gratuitously. Everything, every single thing, everything that's said, everything that happens has to drive the story forward. I mean, it sounds plotting that way, but it's just if it's a good movie, it all works. And the characters are each character is tied to the plot. I mean, the plot should be in service of the characters, unless it's really action adventure, and then it could be the plot. That you still got to care about those characters. I mean, in a good action adventure movie, I think that the main characters are also fleshed out. But it's really the character drives the plot, and every scene has to move the story forward. Now, again, and have a certain amount of, well, they say conflict, but it's more about attention. More than anything, I'd have to say it has to have a reason for being there. It can't just be something gratuitous. It has to have somehow be tied to the plot, so that every character who enters the movie has to have a reason for being in that movie, and every scene has to have a reason for being there. And all of that has to be done without being expositional. You don't want to be making things, doing things that are really saying things that are on the nose. You want to be very careful about how backstory is introduced, how naturally it's done. And the movie I'm going to recommend to you at the end of this to watch does that beautifully, which is why I want you to watch that movie. Also, a really big thing is, are you telling what can be shown? The camera is the best friend of the writer because the camera does a lot of work for you. You can introduce characters without a word of dialogue. There's a lot about what people wear, how they look, where they're located, how they react to somebody else, what you see on their face. I mean, I'm not going to go on and on about it, but the camera does a big job for you, and you want to make sure that you're not saying what the camera can be showing instead. And then there's also the question of if there's an underlying message and how that can be conveyed. Again, it has to be done very, very carefully and subtly so that it doesn't hit you over the head, which is what some movies do. In any event, I think that's enough about some of the basics. I would like to give you a prompt that would be a little writing exercise for, excuse me, I'm going to go back to something else I wanted to say. And that is having to do with why you decided to take this course. So you think you can write a screenplay. Most people think they have a story in their head that's crying to be a movie. I can do that. They see a movie and they think, oh God, I can do that. I can do it better even. And that's basically how I began. I had, this is many, many, many years ago, but somehow I wanted to write a story about a teenager who had a concealed pregnancy, didn't want anybody to know, didn't want to abort, didn't know what to do, couldn't tell the parents for whatever reason, and didn't know where to give birth, how to give birth, if she wanted anybody else to know about it. I just considered, I pictured a really dramatic birth scene. And that's kind of was my starting point, that this is a movie I've got to write. And then I started to think about it. I hadn't figured out so many things. How would she keep the pregnancy hidden? Who was going to help her, if anybody? And what would happen? Where would she give birth? What would happen to the baby, to her? How were they going to do all that? Would the baby live? Would the baby die? What about her? Would she get away with it? Would her parents know about it? Would there be any legal implications? I mean, suppose the baby died or she died and somebody else had been involved helping her and there were legal consequences. There was a crime involved. There were so many options and so much I had to learn. And so, I mean, it was really an incredible journey of trying to sort all of that out. And I finally did, but it was a long process. And that's kind of where I began. So I'm assuming possibly because you are taking this or listening to this, you may have a story in mind. So think about what type of movie you would want to write. If it would be a comedy, a drama, whatever. And if there's a particular movie that you would think of as like your template, the movie you really would wish you could have written and you knew how to write. So based on that, I'm going to give you a little writing prompt. And basically the prompt is your story that I'd like you to track from the beginning to end of this 5-session course. And just understand nobody's born knowing how to do this. There's no rights, there's wrongs. There are rules, but there are no rights or wrongs. And think of it as something that's fun and it's the beginning of a journey. So I'm going to give you just one sentence. It's going to be the start of the movie. It's something you're going to see at the start of a movie, and you're going to take it from there. And again, it can be funny, it can be a comedy, it can be sad, it can be tragic, it can be scary, it can be dark, it can be surreal, it can be absurd, it can be sci-fi. Your main protagonist can be a man, a woman, young, old, any ethnicity. This is your character. So give yourself just a minute to think about who your character is. Try to get in your mind kind of a three-dimensional picture of who you want to spend enough time with to try to write a movie. And I give you just a minute or so to think about that. Okay, wasn't a minute, but minute's up. So here's the sentence. A person is alone in a car, driving on a highway, and gets a flat. I'll take it from there. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Two more minutes. One more minute. Actually, it's a little less than 5 minutes, but I'm going to stop you because I neglected to say I didn't want you to figure out the whole story. I just wanted you to figure out the next like 2 pages of what would be happening. But it doesn't matter because you're going to stick with that story and we're going to continue to develop it. And in fact, I'm going to give you 2 homework assignments. And one of them is to take where you are with that character, or if you've introduced other characters, fine, and take that character and try to write. And if you can use and look up the formatting and figure out how to do it in proper formatting, that'll be great. And if you can't, it's not terrible. You'll learn. But try to think about the first 10 minutes of the movie. What's going to happen? What are we going to learn about that character, that situation, what that person's, think about what I said in the first act. What are the goals of that person? What is that person wanting? Where's that person going? What's going to be the obstacle that's going to kind of catapult them into the bulk of the movie? What's going to be the dream that's going to be kind of getting in their way? So that you write about 10 pages that'll take you on, that'll help you write a little bit of dialogue if you can. Think about the dialogue. Think about the narrative, what it is you're going to be. You're going to always put where the scene is taking place, if it's day or night. And then within that, you're going to be doing a short description of setting the scene. But if you're used to writing narrative, it's going to be somewhat challenging because it's very different. Screenwriting is very different. It's really just setting the place. It's kind of seems very cut and dried. The difficult part of it is that you don't want it to be boring. You want it to be, you want to write it in a way that's kind of not just not boring. That kind of makes it a little bit makes it readable, but it's not going to have a huge amount of description. I mean, if you put like middle America, Main Street, Middle America, that's maybe all you need to say about a little town. You're not going to be showing what every little store looks like or anything else. Anyhow, and try to think about who that person's going to come up encounter, if anybody, and what they may be saying, what they may be thinking, what they may be wearing, what the weather is like, what they may be hearing. Just try to flush out a few pages and see where you get. See what you find are the obstacles. What are the challenges? And if you continue with this series in 2 weeks and you join in the chat, maybe you can write about any questions, what your obstacles were, questions, something where it can be a little bit more interactive with not just me talking at you. The other piece of homework is that I'd like to give you a film to watch after each session. And the film I want you to watch for next time is called The Confirmation. And it's a slightly flawed movie in that it doesn't really deal with the alcoholism of the main character, but it's a very nice movie. I like it a lot. It's simple, really complex, so it's a very good movie for studying and learning about screenwriting, because I don't think there's a gratuitous word in that movie. It's called The Confirmation, has Clive Owen in it. It's only a couple of years old, I think. You can find it on probably Amazon or Netflix. It shouldn't be hard to find. And if you could write this down, it would be helpful. I'm gonna give you a list of things to look for when you're watching it. And then just think about it and then try to apply what you're learning in the writing assignment that I've given you. First, observe how each character is introduced. What are your first impressions? What do you learn about them? What is said? What is not said? What is seen? Second, how much do you learn in the first 5 minutes? Third, notice how backstories are woven into it in a very organic way. without feeling expositional. I think I gave an example, but when I will give you an example because I think that it's something that if you notice this, you'll notice more things that are done along the way. But when an ex-husband, kind of a deadbeat dad, meets up with his ex-wife, and kind of, I don't remember the exact word, but she says words to the effect, if you screw up this time, you're not going to see him again. We learned so much in that sentence. So just think about how the writer has managed to filter in a lot of information that tells you the history of these characters without having to spell it out in any way. Then look at the act structure. Where do you think Act 2 begins? And where does it end? What are the stakes at the beginning and what are the stakes at the end? Track the, it's really, you could argue as to if there's two protagonists or one, because it's a father-son movie, but think about where each of them is at the beginning of the movie and where they are at the end and how it's accomplished. I mean, you have to know from the beginning, when I say when a movie tends to be too obvious, I mean, you have to be pretty sure they're going to end up bonded. I mean, it would be really pretty hard if it weren't a hard movie to watch because they're very likable people. But if, generally speaking, you want to see the progression of how they get there. You also want to think about how alike they are and how different they are. But how was the boy like his father? Then look at the other relationships, the main relationships, and the ways in which they're filtered in and what we learn about them. Also, track the messages and the themes. What are they and how are they conveyed? Note how nothing is gratuitous in this movie. There's nobody introduced. There's nothing that's said. There's no event that happens that isn't somehow introduced to keep building the plot. I mean, it's as much as it's a character-driven movie, the plot is also, continues to go along with it too, but they're very well integrated. Are the characters likable? Well, I just said they are. Well, maybe not all of them. And if so, how is that conveyed? And if not, how is it conveyed? Do you feel like the writer is judging them? Is it a judgmental movie? Is there anything that doesn't ring true? And why and how? I mean, that's really important because that's really where you learn how people, I think, how when a movie doesn't ring true, it's not very satisfying. And then the last thing I'd like to point out is what is the function of truth and of lies, of religion? How do we know that? And as I said, is there what is the point of view of the writer? And does it come across? Is it non-judgmental? Is it judgmental? Think about all those things when you watch it. So hopefully I will see you in 2 weeks again. And to repeat, this is part of the Sarah Lawrence Writing Institute live stream experiences. I also teach a couple of courses. There'll be summer courses, there'll be fall courses, and I would encourage you to look at what they have and think about what other, if I've scared you off, there's a lot of wonderful writing courses that they offer. So I wish you well. I hope you're safe and well in this very, very challenging time that we're living in. And it's also a great time to be doing something like this and challenging yourself and having fun with it. So goodbye till we meet again. Bye. I keep forgetting this isn't, I need my iPad.